Arizona Territory, 1867. The setting sun painted the desert in hues of amber and crimson, as if the land itself was bleeding. Angelina McKinnon stood on the porch of the ranch house, her golden hair catching the dying light as she gazed across the property her father had built with sweat and determination. 3 years had passed since that terrible day, but the memories remained as sharp as broken glass. The wind carried dust and whispers of the past. Whispers of screams, of hoofbeats, of her mother's final breath. "Angelina, get inside now!" Colonel Jeremiah McKinnon's voice cut through her thoughts like a knife. "Sun's going down. You know the rules." She turned to face her father, a man whose shoulders still carried the rigid posture of his military years, despite the silver threading through his once dark hair. His eyes, once kind and full of laughter, now held only the cold calculation of a man consumed by vengeance. "Yes, father," she replied, her voice soft but not submissive. At 22, Angelina had learned to pick her battles carefully. The interior of the ranch house was a fortress, rifles mounted on every wall, windows reinforced with iron bars, escape routes planned with military precision. What had once been a home was now a garrison, and she its reluctant soldier. Colonel McKinnon checked the locks on the door, a ritual as familiar as breathing. "Storm's coming," he muttered, glancing at the darkening sky. "Big one, by the looks of it." Angelina nodded, moving to the kitchen to prepare their evening meal. The wind began to howl outside, sand hissing against the windows like countless tiny serpents. As she worked, her thoughts drifted to the life she once had, before the raid, before her mother's death, before her father transformed their ranch into a monument to his hatred. She remembered her mother's smile, the way she would sing while working in their small garden, how she had taught Angelina that beauty could be found even in the harshest of landscapes. Sarah McKinnon had been the heart of their home, a gentle soul who had somehow tamed the rough soldier who became her husband. The attack came without warning on a spring morning just like any other. Angelina had been collecting eggs from the henhouse when she heard the first screams. By the time her father returned from town, the Apache raiders had taken their cattle, burned the barn, and left Sarah McKinnon's body in the dust of the yard. Something broke in Jeremiah McKinnon that day. The respected colonel who had once spoken of peaceful coexistence with the native tribes became a man possessed, rebuilding their ranch into a fortress and vowing to kill every Apache warrior who crossed his path. "They're animals," he would say, cleaning his rifle in the evenings. "They understand nothing but force, and by heaven I'll give them force enough." Dinner was a silent affair, broken only by the increasing fury of the sandstorm outside. The wind shrieked like a banshee, making the sturdy walls of the ranch house groan in protest. "This will pass by morning," the colonel said, pushing away his plate. "First light, we'll check the property for damage. No wandering off alone, you understand?" "Yes, father," Angelina replied automatically, though inside a small rebellion flickered. These rules, these walls, they were slowly suffocating her. 3 years of living in fear, of seeing nothing but hatred in her father's eyes, of being locked away like a bird in a gilded cage. Later, as she lay in bed listening to the storm's fury, Angelina found herself doing something she hadn't done in months, praying. Not for safety, not for protection, but for change. Something, anything to break the cycle of hatred and isolation that had become her life. "Please," she whispered into the darkness, "send me a way out of this prison." Outside, the storm raged on, reshaping the desert landscape with its violent breath, erasing tracks and boundaries. Nature, in its indifferent power, cared nothing for the artificial lines drawn by men or the grudges they held. And somewhere in that maelstrom of sand and wind, fate was already answering Angelina's desperate prayer in ways she could never have imagined. Dawn broke with an eerie stillness. The storm had passed, leaving behind a transformed world. Dunes shifted, landmarks buried, the very shape of the land altered by the night's fury. Angelina rose early, dressing quickly in her practical riding clothes. Her father would inspect the ranch buildings and fences first, which would give her a rare chance to ride to the creek alone. Water was precious in this unforgiving land, and after such a storm, it was essential to check that their water source remained clean and accessible. She slipped out while her father was busy assessing damage to the barn. Mounting her dun mare, Penny, She rode toward the small creek that cut through the eastern edge of their property. The cool morning air carried the scent of dust and sage, and for a moment, Angelina felt something close to freedom. The creek had swelled with runoff from the distant mountains, its usually modest flow now a respectable stream gurgling over smooth stones. Angelina dismounted, allowing Penny to drink while she walked along the bank, checking for debris that might dam the precious water source. It was then that she saw him. A dark shape lay half-submerged at the creek's edge, partially covered by a fallen cottonwood branch. At first, she thought it might be a deer, or perhaps a stray calf. But as she cautiously approached, her heart hammering against her ribs, she realized it was a man. He lay face down, one arm outstretched, fingers barely touching the water's edge. His long black hair was matted with blood and sand, and his buckskin clothing was torn and stained. But it was the intricate beadwork on his moccasins and the distinctive pattern of his clothing that made Angelina's breath catch in her throat. Apache. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to gallop back to her father and report the presence of an enemy on their land. The colonel would gather his men and they would— Angelina stopped the thought cold. She knew exactly what they would do. Her father had made no secret of his intentions toward any Apache found on their property. Cautiously, she knelt beside the motionless figure, her hand hovering uncertainly above his shoulder. Was he dead? Had he been caught in the storm, perhaps thrown from his horse and struck by the falling branch? Steeling herself, she gently turned him over. The face that met hers was young, perhaps no more than a few years older than her own 22 years. Strong features, a straight nose, and a proud jawline spoke of both strength and nobility. A deep gash crossed his forehead, explaining the blood, but it was the sudden, weak rise of his chest that confirmed he still lived. Angelina sat back on her heels, her mind racing. By rights, this man was her enemy. His people had killed her mother, destroyed her family's peace, and twisted her father into a bitter shadow of the man he once was. The Apache and the white settlers were locked in a cycle of violence and retribution that seemed without end. And yet, this was not some faceless raider or nameless threat. This was a man injured and helpless. To leave him here would be to sentence him to death, from his wounds, from exposure, or from her father's bullets when he was inevitably discovered. The man's eyelids fluttered, and for the briefest moment his eyes opened, dark, deep, and disoriented. They focused on her face with confusion before sliding closed again. In that instant, Angelina made her decision. She couldn't bring him to the ranch. That would be suicide for them both. But a half-mile upstream was an old line shack used during roundups, but abandoned since the raid. It was simple but sound, with a roof and walls and a door that locked. Her father rarely went there anymore. Too many memories, he'd said. It would have to do. "I must be losing my mind," she muttered, looking around to ensure they were still alone. Then, with strength born of years working alongside her father on the ranch, she managed to drag the unconscious man onto Penny's back, securing him as best she could before leading the horse upstream toward the line shack. With each step, questions tumbled through her mind. Who was he? Why was he alone? What would happen when he woke? And most troubling of all, what would she tell her father? The line shack appeared around a bend in the creek, its weathered wood silvered by years of sun and wind. Angelina worked quickly, opening the door and clearing space on the simple cot inside. With considerable effort, she maneuvered the unconscious man onto the bed. In the better light of the shack, she could see his injuries more clearly. The gash on his forehead was deep but not life-threatening. There were bruises forming on his ribs, and what appeared to be an older wound on his upper arm, a bullet graze, perhaps, partially healed. Moving with efficient purpose, Angelina retrieved the small medical kit kept in the shack and set about cleaning and bandaging his wounds. As she worked, she couldn't help noticing the contrast between this man and the savage her father had described countless times. His face in repose was peaceful, almost noble. The calluses on his hands spoke of work and skill, not mindless violence. When she had done all she could, Angelina sat back, realizing with a start that the sun had climbed high in the sky. Her father would be looking for her. "I'll return when I can," she said softly to the unconscious man, knowing he couldn't hear her, but feeling the need to speak the promise aloud. "Don't die before then." As she mounted Penny for the ride back to the ranch, Angelina felt a strange lightness in her chest. something she hadn't experienced in years. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once, this secret rebellion against everything her father had taught her to believe. For the first time since her mother's death, Angelina McKinnon had made a choice entirely her own: consequences be damned. And that choice would change everything. The ride back to the ranch seemed both endless and too brief. Angelina's mind raced with explanations for her absence, excuses that would satisfy her father's inevitable questions without revealing the truth of what she had done, what she was still doing. For her decision to save the Apache warrior wasn't a momentary impulse but a conscious choice that would require continued deception. Colonel McKinnon was waiting on the porch when she rode in, his face set in lines of worry that quickly transformed to relief, then stern disapproval. "Where have you been?" he demanded as she dismounted. "I've been searching the east pasture for you." "I'm sorry, Father," Angelina replied, the lie coming more easily than she had expected. "I rode out to check the creek after the storm. There was so much debris I lost track of time clearing a fallen cottonwood that was damming the flow." It wasn't entirely false, which perhaps explained why her father's suspicious gaze softened slightly. Water was life in this harsh land. Tending to their water source was a responsibility they both understood. "You should have told me where you were going," he said, his tone gentler now. "These are dangerous times, Angie." "I know." She led Penny toward the stable, grateful for the chance to hide her face as she unsaddled the mare. It won't happen again. But even as she spoke the words, Angelina knew it was a promise she would break. She had to return to the line shack, had to check on the wounded man, had to... What? What did she imagine would happen when he awoke? Would he attack her? Thank her? Slip away into the wilderness without a word? And why did the thought of that last possibility fill her with a strange, inexplicable disappointment? The remainder of the day passed in a blur of normal tasks: mending, cooking, helping her father assess the storm damage to their property. But beneath the routine activities, Angelina's thoughts repeatedly drifted to the line shack and its unconscious occupant. Had he awakened yet? Was he in pain? Was he even still alive? As evening approached, she made a decision. She would find a way to return to the shack tonight, under cover of darkness. The risk was considerable. Her father maintained strict rules about leaving the house after sunset, but the alternative, waiting until morning, seemed impossible. The Apache warrior might need water, food, medical attention. He might have awakened confused and in pain, might have tried to leave despite his injuries. Dinner was a quiet affair, as most meals had been since her mother's death. Colonel McKinnon discussed the repairs needed after the storm, the state of their cattle, the rumors of Apache activity further north. Angelina responded when necessary, asking questions about the repairs, offering to ride to town for supplies. Anything to appear normal, engaged, the dutiful daughter she had always been. "I'm tired tonight," her father said finally, pushing back from the table. "Think I'll turn in early. You should too, Angie. Been a long day for both of us." "I will, Father. Just need to finish a few things first." He nodded, his weathered face softening with affection as he looked at her. His only child, so like her mother in appearance, if not in temperament. "Good night, then." "Good night." Angelina waited a full hour after her father's bedroom door closed before making her move. She gathered supplies, clean bandages, a water skin, bread and dried meat wrapped in a cloth, and slipped silently from the house. The moon was nearly full, providing enough light to see by as she made her way to the stable. Penny nickered softly in recognition as Angelina entered. "Shh, girl," she whispered, stroking the mare's velvet nose. "We need to be quiet." Saddling the horse quickly, Angelina led her out of the stable and a good distance from the house before mounting, not wanting the sound of hoofbeats to alert her father. Only when they were well away from the ranch buildings did she urge Penny into a canter, heading east toward the creek and the line shack beyond. The night was clear, the storm's fury replaced by an almost unnatural stillness. Stars blazed overhead in the vast desert sky, casting enough light that Angelina could navigate without difficulty. She knew these lands intimately, had explored them since childhood on horseback and on foot, learning their secrets, finding beauty in their harsh contours. But tonight, the familiar landscape seemed charged with new meaning, as if her decision to help the Apache warrior had altered not just her future, but the very nature of the world around her. Everything, The whisper of wind through sage, the occasional call of a nightbird, the solid warmth of Penny beneath her, felt more immediate, more significant. As she approached the line shack, Angelina slowed Penny to a walk, suddenly uncertain. What if the warrior had awakened? What if he was waiting inside, recovered enough to see her as an enemy? What if this act of mercy was about to transform into a deadly confrontation? She dismounted a short distance away, tethering Penny to a stunted juniper where the mare could graze. Approaching the shack on foot, Angelina withdrew the small revolver her father had insisted she learn to use years ago. She had never fired it at anything but targets, had never imagined needing it for protection against another human being. But tonight, prudence outweighed principle. The shack stood silent in the moonlight, no light or sound emanating from within. Angelina hesitated at the door, listening intently before finally pushing it open, the revolver steady in her hand. The interior was dark, but moonlight filtering through the single small window revealed the figure still lying on the cot. Relief washed through her. He hadn't left, hadn't been discovered. Moving closer, she saw that he remained unconscious, his breathing shallow but regular. Setting the revolver aside, Angelina lit the small oil lamp kept in the shack, adjusting the flame to its lowest setting. In its warm glow, she examined her patient more thoroughly than she had been able to in the rush of her first visit. The wound on his forehead had stopped bleeding, though it would need cleaning again. His skin was hot to the touch, fever setting in, a dangerous development. Angelina worked methodically, bathing his face with cool water from the creek, changing the bandage on his forehead, coaxing a few drops of water between his cracked lips. As she worked, she found herself studying his features more carefully. He was handsome in a way entirely different from the white men she knew. His face all clean lines and sharp angles, his copper skin smooth except for a small scar near his left eyebrow. How had he gotten that scar? What was his name? What was his story? "Who are you?" she whispered, not expecting an answer. To her shock, the man's eyelids fluttered, then opened. Dark eyes, confused and glazed with fever, met hers. "Water," he rasped in English, the single word so unexpected that Angelina nearly dropped the cloth she was holding. You speak English," she stammered, reaching for the water skin. "Mission school," he replied weakly. 5 years. Angelina helped him drink, supporting his head with one hand while holding the water skin to his lips with the other. He drank greedily, then sank back onto the cot, his brief moment of consciousness apparently exhausting him. But before his eyes closed again, he spoke once more, the words so soft Angelina had to lean close to hear them. "Why are you helping me, white girl?" It was the question she had been asking herself since finding him by the creek. Why indeed? Why risk everything for a man whose people had brought such devastation to her family? "I don't know," she answered honestly. "Maybe because it was the right thing to do." A ghost of a smile touched his lips before unconsciousness claimed him once more. "Nodin," he whispered as his eyes closed. "What?" "My name. Nodin." And then he was gone again, his breathing settling into the rhythm of deep sleep or unconsciousness. Angelina sat back, the single word, his name, echoing in her mind. Nodin. She had a name now for the man whose life she had saved, whose secret she was keeping, whose existence had suddenly become entangled with her own in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. As she continued tending to his fever through the long night hours, Angelina felt as though she had crossed some invisible boundary. There was no going back now, no pretending that the world was as simple as her father had painted it, divided neatly into friends and enemies, civilized and savage, right and wrong. By saving Nodin's life, she had stepped into a more complex reality, one where an Apache warrior could speak perfect English, where a colonel's daughter could betray everything she had been taught to believe, where the lines between hatred and understanding, fear and compassion, might prove more permeable than anyone had imagined. Dawn was approaching by the time Angelina finished her ministrations. Nodin's fever had broken, and his breathing was stronger, more regular. He would live, at least for now. Gathering her supplies, she took one last look at the sleeping warrior before slipping out into the pre-dawn light. As she rode back toward the ranch, racing the rising sun, Angelina realized that in saving Nodin, she might have set in motion events that would change not just his fate, but her own. What that change might entail, she couldn't begin to guess. But for the first time in 3 years, She felt fully alive, fully present in her own life, no longer merely existing in the shadow of her father's grief and rage. Whatever came next, she would face it with her eyes open. Angelina McKinnon managed to slip back into her bedroom just as the first rays of sunrise painted the eastern horizon. She had barely changed her clothes and tucked away the blood-stained garments when her father's heavy footsteps sounded in the hallway. The night spent tending to Nodin's fever had left her exhausted, but there was no time for rest. Not if she wanted to keep her dangerous secret. "Angelina, you up?" Colonel McKinnon's voice carried through the door. "Yes, father," she called, quickly pinching her cheeks to bring color to her pale face before opening the door. "Just getting dressed." Her father's weathered face showed no suspicion, only the familiar mixture of love and worry that had characterized his expression since her mother's death. "Got a busy day ahead. Watson found a breach in the north fence line. Might be Apache." Angelina's heart jumped at the word, but she kept her face carefully neutral. "Do you need me to ride with you?" "No," he replied firmly. "You'll stay close to the house today. I'm taking most of the men." Any other day she would have argued against being left behind like a child. Today his protectiveness was exactly what she needed. "Be careful," she said, meaning it despite her relief at the unexpected opportunity his absence would provide. 3 hours later, Angelina watched from the porch as her father and 5 ranch hands rode out, dust rising behind their horses as they headed north. She waited until they were tiny specks on the horizon before rushing to the kitchen, hastily packing supplies. Bread, dried beef, honey from last year's harvest, clean bandages, and herbs for fever and pain. This time she left Penny in the stable, not wanting to risk her father noticing the mare's absence if they returned early. Instead, she set out on foot, cutting across the property toward the creek and the line shack beyond. The walk was long under the relentless Arizona sun, but urgency and anxiety propelled her forward. What would she find? Had Nodin recovered enough to leave during the night? Or had his fever worsened, his wounds festered? Had she saved him only for him to die alone in that abandoned shack? And beneath these immediate concerns lurked a deeper question, one she dared not examine too closely. Why did she care so much about the fate of this Apache warrior? The line shack appeared unchanged from outside, silent and weathered beneath the midday sun. Angelina approached cautiously, her hand instinctively moving to the small knife at her belt. She had left the revolver behind, too difficult to explain if someone noticed its absence, but she wasn't foolish enough to come completely unarmed. She pushed the door open slowly, blinking as her eyes adjusted to the dimness within. The shape on the cot stirred, and a pair of dark, alert eyes fixed on her. The Apache warrior was sitting up, his back against the wall, one hand gripping a makeshift weapon, a piece of firewood sharpened to a crude point. They stared at each other in tense silence, neither moving. "I'm not going to hurt you," Angelina said finally, keeping her voice steady despite the fear fluttering in her chest. "I brought food and fresh bandages." The man's expression remained guarded, but his gaze flicked to the bundle in her arms, then back to her face. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered his improvised weapon. "You helped me," he said, his English accented but clear. "Why?" The question caught Angelina off guard. Why indeed? She had asked herself the same thing countless times over the past day. "You were injured," she replied simply. "I couldn't leave you to die." A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, or disbelief, crossed his face. "Your kind rarely show such mercy to mine." "Nor yours to mine," Angelina countered, a flash of her mother's face appearing unbidden in her mind. A ghost of a smile touched the warrior's lips. "Then we are both exceptions." He inclined his head slightly. "I am Nodin." Angelina hesitated only briefly before responding. "Angelina McKinnon." Recognition dawned in Nodin's eyes. McKinnon. He said the name carefully, testing it. "The Colonel's daughter." Angelina stiffened. "You know my father?" "All Apache know Colonel McKinnon," Nodin replied, his voice neutral but his eyes watchful. "He has killed many of my people." "And your people killed my mother," Angelina shot back, the words escaping before she could stop them. Silence fell between them, heavy with the weight of blood and history. Finally, Nodin spoke again, his voice softer. "War brings suffering to all sides. I am sorry for your loss." The simple statement, delivered without excuse or defense, disarmed Angelina more effectively than any argument could have. She moved further into the shack, placing the bundle on the small table. "How are your wounds?" she asked, changing the subject. Nodin touched the bandage on his forehead. "Healing. You have skill as a healer." "My mother taught me," Angelina said, unwrapping the bundle to reveal bread, dried meat, and the small pot of honey. She believed in being prepared for anything in this land. A wise woman. She was. Angelina busied herself with arranging the food, uncomfortable with the unexpected civility of their exchange. This man was supposed to be a savage, an enemy, not someone who spoke of wisdom and offered condolences. "You should eat," she said briskly. "Then I'll check your bandages." Nodin made no move toward the food. "Why do you help me, daughter of McKinnon? Your father would kill me without hesitation." Angelina met his gaze squarely. "I am not my father." Something shifted in Nodin's expression, a recognition, perhaps, or a reassessment. He nodded once, then reached for the bread. They ate in silence, the only sounds the creek's gentle murmur outside and the occasional call of a desert bird. When they had finished, Angelina gathered her medical supplies. "I need to check your wounds," she said, approaching the cot with determination she didn't entirely feel. Nodin nodded, sitting still as she unwound the bandage from his forehead. The gash was healing cleanly. The angry redness faded to a more normal pink. Her fingers worked gently, cleaning the wound with water she'd brought from the creek. "You were caught in the sandstorm?" she asked as she worked. "Yes, I was returning from a journey. My horse was frightened by lightning. I was thrown." Angelina sensed there was more to the story, but didn't press. "You're lucky. Many have died in storms like that." "Perhaps it was not luck," Nodin said, his dark eyes meeting hers with unsettling directness. "Perhaps it was destiny that brought me to your creek." Angelina's hands stilled momentarily before she resumed her work. "I don't believe in destiny." "No? What do you believe in, Angelina McKinnon?" The question, so simply asked, struck her like a physical blow. What did she believe in? Once she had believed in her father's strength, in the goodness of their life on the frontier, in the future they were building. Now she lived day to day, a prisoner in her own home, watching the man she loved most destroy himself with hatred. "I believe in surviving," she said finally. "One day at a time." Nodin nodded, as if she had confirmed something he already knew. "That is how my people have lived since the white man came. One day at a time, surviving." Angelina finished rebandaging his wound in silence, uncomfortable with the parallel he had drawn between them. She moved to check the injury on his arm, which was also healing well. "You should be able to travel soon," she said, more brusquely than she intended. "It's not safe for you here. My father patrols these lands regularly." "Where would you have me go?" Nodin asked, a hint of challenge in his voice. "My people's hunting grounds shrink with each season. The white man's soldiers push us further into the mountains, away from the water, away from the game." "That's not my concern," Angelina replied, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. Nodin caught her wrist as she turned away, his grip firm but not painful. "Then why save me at all? Why risk your father's wrath for an enemy you care nothing about?" The touch of his hand sent an unexpected warmth through Angelina's arm. She pulled away, confused by her reaction. "I told you I couldn't leave you to die. And I ask again, why?" Angelina turned to face him fully, frustration rising in her chest. "Because it was the right thing to do. Because watching my father's hatred consume him these past 3 years has shown me where that path leads, and I won't follow him down it. Because—" She stopped, suddenly aware of how her voice had risen. Nodin watched her with those unfathomable dark eyes. "Because you are not what they have tried to make you," he finished softly. The simple truth of his words silenced her. "Neither am I," he continued. "My father is Chief Kale. He wishes me to lead our warriors against the white settlers, to drive them from our lands or die trying." A shadow crossed his face. "But I have seen too much death already. I seek another way." Angelina stared at him, struggling to reconcile this articulate, thoughtful man with the bloodthirsty savages her father had described countless times. "If you don't want war, what do you want?" "The same as you, I think," Nodin replied. "To survive. To find a way to live that doesn't require me to become something I cannot bear to be." The parallel between them grew stronger, more undeniable. Angelina turned away, gathering her supplies with hands that trembled slightly. "I need to return before my father grows suspicious," she said. "I'll try to come back tomorrow with more food." "Angelina," Nodin said her name softly, testing the sound of it. "Thank you. For my life." She paused at the door, looking back at the warrior who had somehow, in the space of a single conversation, shifted from enemy to something she had no name for. "Don't make me regret it," she replied, and slipped out into the bright Arizona afternoon. The walk back to the ranch seemed longer, the sun hotter, the landscape more exposed. Angelina's mind churned with the conversation she had just had. Chief Keele's son, a man caught between worlds, just as she was, torn between duty and personal conviction, between what was expected and what felt right. How strange to find such unexpected common ground with someone who should have been her mortal enemy. By the time she reached the ranch, the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon. She hurried through her chores, preparing dinner with automatic movements, while her thoughts remained with the wounded warrior in the line shack. Had she been foolish to tell him her name, to reveal that she was Colonel McKinnon's daughter? Would he use that information against her somehow? But even as these cautious questions surfaced, another part of her mind rejected them. There had been honesty in Nodin's dark eyes, a directness that suggested he was not a man given to deception, and his words about seeking another path, about resisting the cycle of violence that had claimed so many lives on both sides, those had rung with genuine conviction. The sound of approaching horses interrupted her thoughts. Through the kitchen window, she saw her father and his men riding in, their postures weary but alert. Taking a deep breath, Angelina composed herself. She would need all her self-control to hide the tumult of emotions roiling within her. "Any sign of them?" she asked as her father entered, his face grim beneath the dust of the day's ride. "Tracks," he replied, pouring water from the pitcher on the sideboard. "Fresh ones heading east, probably a scouting party." He drank deeply, then fixed her with a penetrating stare. "You stayed close to the house?" "Of course," she lied, the deception coming more easily than it should have. "I worked in the garden most of the day." The colonel nodded, apparently satisfied. "Good. Can't be too careful with those devils about." Devils. The word jarred against the memory of Nodin's quiet dignity, his thoughtful eyes, his acknowledgement of her loss. But Angelina merely nodded, turning back to the stove to hide whatever might show on her face. That night, sleep eluded her. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every moment of her encounter with Nodin. His questions about why she had saved him, his revelation about being Chief Keele's son, the strange connection she had felt, despite everything that should have divided them, and beneath it all, a growing awareness that something fundamental had shifted inside her. The neat categories that had defined her world for the past 3 years, Apache and settler, enemy and friend, savage and civilized, had begun to blur, revealing a complexity she had not been prepared to face. It would have been easier if Nodin had been what her father claimed all Apache were: brutal, animal-like, incapable of the higher emotions that defined humanity. But he was none of those things. He was educated, articulate, capable of compassion and introspection. He had suffered loss just as she had. He questioned the path others had chosen for him, just as she did. In saving his life, Angelina had unwittingly opened a door she wasn't sure she could close again, a door to understanding, to connection across seemingly unbridgeable divides. And that realization terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. 3 days passed before Angelina could return to the line shack again. Her father, increasingly concerned about Apache activity in the area, had kept her close, finding reasons for her to remain at the ranch house, while he and the men patrolled their boundaries. The waiting was agonizing. Had Nodin recovered enough to leave? Had his people found him? Or was he still there, perhaps growing weaker without adequate food and care? Finally, on the 4th day, an opportunity presented itself. A broken fence needed repair in the south pasture, requiring all available hands. Angelina, left alone at the ranch with only old Mrs. Simmons for company, waited just long enough for the dust of the departing riders to settle before making her excuse. "I need to gather herbs by the creek," she told the elderly housekeeper, who was half-deaf and unlikely to question her absence for a few hours. "Mother's headache remedy. We're running low." Without waiting for a response, Angelina hurried to the stable, saddling Penny with practiced efficiency. Minutes later, they were galloping toward the line shack, anxiety and anticipation building with each hoofbeat. What would she find? And why did the answer matter so much? The line shack appeared unchanged from the outside. Weathered wood, small window, door closed against the midday heat. But as Angelina dismounted and approached, she sensed a difference. There was stillness that suggested emptiness rather than occupancy. Her heart sinking, she pushed open the door. The cot was empty, the small space tidied with careful precision. Nodin was gone. Disappointment washed through her, surprisingly intense. She had known he would leave eventually, had encouraged it even, knowing the danger of discovery grew with each passing day. Yet standing in the empty shack, Angelina felt a loss that made no rational sense. She had known this man for only a matter of days, had spoken with him only once. Why should his absence affect her so strongly? A small object on the table caught her eye, a piece of wood, carved with meticulous detail into the shape of a hawk in flight. Beside it lay a single eagle feather, its pattern of dark and light bands striking against the rough wood of the table. Gifts, or perhaps messages. But what did they mean? Angelina picked up the carving, running her fingers over its smooth contours. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, capturing the power and grace of the bird in mid-flight. Had Nodin made this during his recovery? Had he left it specifically for her? The feather was equally beautiful, clearly chosen with care, its significance beyond her understanding, but its intention clear. A token of gratitude, perhaps, or something more. She tucked both items into her pocket, strangely reluctant to leave despite the emptiness of the shack. It felt like an ending, though to what, she couldn't say. A brief, unexpected connection across worlds that should never have intersected. A moment of understanding that had no future, no possibility of continuation. With a sigh, Angelina turned to leave and froze. Nodin stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright light outside. "You came back," he said simply. Relief flooded through her, so intense it was almost dizzying. "I thought you had gone," she replied, gesturing to the empty cot, the tidied space. "I went to wash in the creek," Nodin explained, stepping into the shack, "and to hunt. I have been a burden on your generosity long enough." He looked different today, stronger, more himself. The bandage was gone from his forehead, revealing a healing wound that would leave a scar but posed no further danger. He moved with the fluid grace she remembered from her first glimpse of him, before injury had rendered him vulnerable. "You made these?" Angelina asked, withdrawing the carving and feather from her pocket. Nodin nodded, a hint of uncertainty in his expression. "Among my people, gifts are given to acknowledge a debt that cannot be repaid with words alone." "You owe me nothing," she said automatically. "I owe you my life," he countered. "The hawk represents vision, the ability to see what others cannot. The eagle feather is a symbol of courage and truth. Both are qualities you have shown, Angelina McKinnon." The formal words, spoken with quiet dignity, touched something deep within her. "They're beautiful," she said softly. "Thank you." An awkward silence fell between them, neither quite knowing how to proceed. The dynamic had shifted now that Nodin was no longer a patient needing her care. He was a man standing tall and strong before her, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. "I should go soon," he said finally. "Return to my people. They will be searching for me." "Yes," Angelina agreed, though the word tasted bitter. "It isn't safe for you here. Nor for you if you are discovered helping me." The simple truth hung between them, underscoring the impossibility of whatever tentative connection had begun to form. They belonged to different worlds, worlds locked in a cycle of violence and retribution that neither could escape. "Will your father welcome your return?" Angelina asked, remembering what Nodin had said about Chief Kale's expectations. A shadow crossed his face. "He will be relieved that I live. Beyond that," he shrugged, "I am his only son, the future leader of our band. He has certain hopes for me that I have disappointed in the past." "Because you don't want war," Angelina guessed. Nodin moved to the small window, looking out at the desert landscape beyond. "My father is not a cruel man," he said carefully, "but he has watched the white settlers take more of our land each season. He has buried too many of our people, women, children, elders, killed by soldiers or disease or starvation as our hunting grounds shrink. His heart has hardened with each loss. The description could have applied equally to Colonel McKinnon. Angelina felt a pang of recognition, of shared understanding that transcended the barriers of culture and heritage. "My father was different once too," she said quietly, moving to stand beside Nodin at the window. "Before my mother died, he spoke of peaceful coexistence, of finding ways to share this land. But grief changed him, hardened him, as you said." "Grief is a powerful force," Nodin agreed. "It can transform even the gentlest soul into a warrior bent on vengeance." They stood side by side, looking out at the land that both their peoples claimed, vast, beautiful, and indifferent to the human conflicts that scarred its surface. For a moment, Angelina was acutely aware of Nodin's presence beside her, the warmth radiating from his tall frame, the subtle scent of sage and smoke that clung to his buckskin clothing, the quiet strength he projected without effort. "I should go," she said finally, breaking the spell. "My father will return soon." Nodin turned to face her, his expression grave but gentle. "You have shown me that there is goodness among your people, Angelina McKinnon, that not all white settlers see the Apache as animals to be hunted or driven away. And you have shown me the same about yours," she replied. "Perhaps if more people on both sides could see beyond their hatred." "Perhaps," Nodin echoed, though his tone held little hope. "But hatred is easier than understanding, vengeance simpler than forgiveness." Angelina knew he was right, and yet standing there in that small shack looking into the eyes of a man who should have been her enemy but had somehow become something else entirely, she couldn't help feeling that something important had happened, a small breach in the wall of mistrust and fear that separated their peoples. "Goodbye, Nodin," she said softly, extending her hand in the white man's gesture of farewell. Instead of taking it, he reached out and gently tucked a strand of golden hair behind her ear, his fingers brushing her cheek in a touch so light it might have been the desert breeze. "May the Creator watch over your path, Angelina," he replied. "Perhaps one day our trails will cross again." The simple blessing, spoken with quiet sincerity, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. "I hope so," she whispered, and meant it with a depth that surprised her. As she rode away from the line shack, the carved hawk and eagle feather safely tucked in her pocket, Angelina knew that something fundamental had changed within her. She could no longer see the world through the simplistic lens her father had constructed, a world of absolute right and wrong, of civilization versus savagery, of unquestioning hatred for those deemed other. Nodin had shown her another way of seeing, another possibility. And though she might never see him again, though their brief connection might fade into memory with the passing seasons, she knew she could never return to the unthinking acceptance that had characterized her life before. In saving his life, she had saved something equally important in herself, the capacity to question, to see beyond boundaries, to recognize the humanity in those she had been taught to fear and hate. It was a dangerous awakening in this harsh land, where old hatreds died hard and new understandings were viewed with suspicion. But as Penny carried her back toward the ranch and the life that awaited her there, Angelina clutched the carved hawk in her pocket and welcomed the danger. Better to live fully awake, she thought, even at risk, than to sleepwalk through life behind walls of fear and ignorance. Better to have known Nodin, however briefly, than never to have glimpsed the possibility he represented, the possibility that even in this blood-soaked territory, there might yet be hope for understanding across the chasms that divided them. A week passed, then another. Spring deepened toward summer, the desert blooming briefly before the true heat descended. Angelina moved through her days like someone sleepwalking, performing her duties with mechanical precision, while her thoughts remained fixed on the line shack, the carved hawk, and the man who had given it to her. Nodin. The name whispered through her mind during quiet moments, accompanied by memories of dark, thoughtful eyes and a voice that spoke of peace in a land torn by conflict. Had he returned safely to his people? Was he even now arguing against war, as he had suggested he would? Or had circumstances forced him back into the role of warrior that his father expected him to fill? The questions haunted her, unanswerable, yet persistent. She kept the hawk carving hidden beneath her mattress, taking it out in private moments to run her fingers over its smooth contours, to marvel at the skill and patience that had shaped it. The eagle feather she wore pressed between her skin and her chemise close to her heart, a secret talisman connecting her to something, someone, beyond the confines of her circumscribed existence. Colonel McKinnon noticed the change in his daughter, though he misinterpreted its cause. "You've been quiet lately, Angie," he remarked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in hues of flame and gold. "Something troubling you?" "Just thinking," she replied, careful to keep her voice neutral, "about Mother, about what she would think of our life now." It wasn't entirely a lie. Sarah McKinnon's gentle spirit had indeed been much on Angelina's mind of late, particularly as she contemplated the wall of hatred her father had built between himself and the native people who shared this harsh, beautiful land. The colonel's face softened at the mention of his wife. "She was always the better of us," he said quietly. "Saw goodness where I saw only danger. Reached out when I would have turned away. Like with that Navajo family," Angelina suggested, seizing the opening. "The ones caught in the blizzard 2 winters before she died." Her father nodded, his gaze distant with memory. "Woman was about to give birth. I wanted to send them on their way with some supplies. Your mother wouldn't hear of it. Insisted we shelter them until the storm passed." "And they were grateful," Angelina pressed gently. "The man helped repair our barn roof. His wife taught Mother that weaving technique she used for her last blanket." "Different times," the colonel said, his expression hardening once more. "Before we knew what savagery they were capable of. The Navajo aren't Apache," Angelina pointed out, treading carefully. "And even among the Apache, surely not all bands, not all individuals." "Enough, Angelina." Her father's tone brooked no argument. "I won't have this conversation again. All Indians are the same at heart. Wild, unpredictable, dangerous. The sooner they're all on reservations, the better for everyone." He rose, effectively ending the discussion, and moved into the house. Angelina remained on the porch, frustration burning in her chest. How could she reach him when his mind was so firmly closed? How could she make him see that the path of hatred and vengeance he had chosen would never bring peace, not to this territory, and certainly not to his own wounded soul? The sunset faded, stars emerging in the vast desert sky. Angelina lingered, drawing comfort from the beauty and constancy of the heavens. Somewhere out there, perhaps Nodin too was looking up at these same stars. The thought created an unexpected connection across the miles and barriers that separated them. "Where are you?" she whispered to the night. "Are you safe? Do you ever think of me?" The questions dissolved into the darkness, unanswered but not forgotten. 3 nights later, Angelina bolted upright in bed, startled from sleep by a sound that didn't belong, a soft tapping at her window. Her first instinct was fear, Apache raid. But raiders wouldn't knock politely on a young woman's bedroom window. Heart racing, she slipped from bed and moved cautiously to the window, peering through the glass into the moonlit night. What she saw there stole her breath. Nodin, standing in the shadow of the oak tree that grew near the house, his finger raised to his lips in a gesture for silence. For a moment, Angelina thought she must still be dreaming. The audacity, the danger of his presence here, at the very heart of Colonel McKinnon's domain, it seemed impossible. Yet there he stood, real and solid in the silver moonlight, waiting for her response. With shaking hands, she unlatched the window and eased it open. "Are you mad?" she whispered, the words carrying more concern than anger. "If my father sees you—" "I had to speak with you," Nodin replied, his voice low and urgent. It could not wait. Something in his tone sent a chill down Angelina's spine. "What's happened?" "Not here," he said, glancing toward the main part of the house where the colonel slept. "Can you meet me?" "By the creek, where you found me." Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous, foolhardy, potentially disastrous. Yet Angelina found herself nodding. "Give me 10 minutes." She dressed hastily in the dark, choosing her darkest skirt and shawl, practical boots that would make little noise. The household was silent, her father a sound sleeper, especially after the glasses of whiskey he consumed each evening to keep his demons at bay. Still, she moved with exaggerated caution, avoiding the creaking floorboard outside his room, easing the back door open just enough to slip through. The night was cool, the half-moon providing enough light to navigate by as she made her way toward the creek. Her mind raced with possibilities. What could be so urgent that Nodin would risk coming to the ranch itself? Had there been an attack? Was his father planning something that put the settlers in danger? Or was it something more personal? She found him waiting at the spot where their paths had first crossed, where she had found him injured and unconscious after the sandstorm. He stood tall and alert in the moonlight, his hair loose around his shoulders, dressed in the traditional buckskin of his people rather than the borrowed clothes he had worn during his recovery. "You came," he said as she approached, relief evident in his voice. "Of course I came," Angelina replied, then added more sharply, "though this is madness. If my father's men had seen you—" "I know the risk," Nodin interrupted, "but there was no other way. No time to find a safer meeting place." "What's happened?" she asked again, studying his face in the moonlight. The weeks since their parting had changed him somewhat. A new tension in his jaw, a wariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "My father is gathering warriors," he said, without preamble, "planning an attack on the white settlements in this area, including your father's ranch." The words hit Angelina like a physical blow. When? Soon. Within days. Nodin's expression was grim. "I've argued against it, but many of the young men are eager for battle, for the chance to count coup and earn honor. And my father," he sighed, "my father believes that only through strength can we maintain what little remains of our territory." "There must be something we can do," Angelina said, her mind racing. "I could warn my father." "And tell him how you came by this information?" Nodin countered. "Besides, your father's response would be to gather men for a counterattack. More bloodshed, more hatred, the cycle continuing." He was right, and they both knew it. Colonel McKinnon would see an Apache attack as vindication of everything he believed, as justification for the ruthless campaign of extermination he had long advocated. "Then what?" Angelina asked, frustration evident in her voice. "We just wait for people to die? For your warriors or my father's men to add more blood to soil that's already drunk too much?" Nodin stepped closer, close enough that she could see the moonlight reflected in his dark eyes. "I have been thinking, searching for another way. There is a man in the territorial capital, Judge Hollister. He is known to be fair-minded, to believe that peace between our peoples is possible. If he could be persuaded to arrange a meeting between my father and the territorial governor, a peace council?" Angelina's heart quickened at the possibility. "Do you think your father would agree to such a thing?" "Not easily," Nodin admitted. "But he respects strength and courage. If the invitation came from someone with authority, delivered in the proper way—" He paused, considering. "It would need to be presented as an opportunity to speak for our people's rights, not as a surrender." "And the governor? Would he agree to meet with Apache leaders?" "Perhaps with the right intermediary. Judge Hollister has the governor's ear, they say." A fragile hope began to form between them, tenuous, surrounded by obstacles, but real nonetheless. A chance, however slim, to break the cycle of violence that had claimed so many lives on both sides. "I could go to town," Angelina suggested, the plan taking shape as she spoke. "Speak with Judge Hollister. My father respects him. He wouldn't question my visiting the judge's family. His daughter and I were at school together in St. Louis." Nodin's expression lightened slightly. "You would do this? To prevent bloodshed?" "Yes." Angelina didn't add the other reasons that motivated her, the desire to see Nodin again, the strange connection she felt to his quest for peace, the growing certainty that the path her father had chosen led only to more suffering for all concerned. "It would be dangerous," Nodin warned. "If your father discovered your involvement—" "He won't," she said with more confidence than she felt. "I'll be careful. And it's worth the risk, isn't it? If there's even a chance of preventing more deaths." Nodin studied her face in the moonlight, his expression softening. "You continue to surprise me, Angelina McKinnon. Most white women would flee at the mention of Apache warriors, yet here you stand, planning peace councils and diplomatic missions." "Most white women haven't had the chance to see beyond the stories they're told," she replied simply. "I have." Something shifted in Nodin's gaze, a warmth, an admiration that sent a flutter through Angelina's chest. For a moment, the night seemed to still around them, the usual sounds of the desert fading as they stood facing each other in the silver moonlight. "Thank you," he said softly, "for seeing me. Not just the Apache, not just the enemy your father named, but me." The simple words, spoken with quiet sincerity, touched something deep within Angelina. "And thank you," she replied, "for seeing me as more than just the Colonel's daughter." Nodin's hand moved as if to reach for hers, then hesitated, suspended in the space between them. Angelina found herself holding her breath, caught in a moment that seemed balanced on a knife's edge. Then, from the direction of the ranch house, came the sound that shattered everything. A dog's frantic barking followed by a man's shout. "Someone's discovered you're missing," Nodin said urgently, already backing toward the deeper shadows. "Go quickly. Return to the house." "But our plan—" "I'll find a way to contact you," he promised. "After you've spoken with the judge. There's a place, a canyon with red rock carvings, half a day's ride west of the line shack. My people consider it sacred. Few whites know of it. Meet me there in 5 days' time." 5 days, Angelina repeated, committing the location to memory. "Be careful, Nodin." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Always Angelina McKinnon. Then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness with the silent grace of his people, leaving Angelina to hurry back toward the ranch house and whatever explanation she would need to craft for her nighttime absence. "Sleepwalking?" Colonel McKinnon's skeptical gaze bored into his daughter across the breakfast table the following morning. "You expect me to believe that?" "It's happened before," Angelina replied, maintaining eye contact despite the guilt churning in her stomach. "Remember when I was 12 after the fever? Dr. Miller said it might recur during times of stress." Her father's expression remained doubtful, but he seemed unwilling to accuse her of outright lying. "And what stress are you under now, Angelina? What troubles you enough to send you wandering out into the night without even a shawl for warmth?" The genuine concern beneath his gruff questioning made her deception all the more painful. This man loved her, in his way, had raised her alone after her mother's death, had done what he thought necessary to protect her in this dangerous territory. That his methods had become a prison, that his hatred had warped what was once a noble character, these were tragedies, not crimes. "Dreams," she said softly, allowing real emotion to color her voice. "About Mother, about the raid. They've been coming more frequently lately." It wasn't entirely false. The nightmares had indeed returned in recent weeks, though their content had changed. Now they featured Nodin's people attacking the ranch, her father's men retaliating, blood flowing on both sides, while she stood helpless to prevent any of it. The Colonel's face softened slightly. "You should have told me, Angie. I could have Dr. Miller prepare a sleeping draught." "No," she said quickly, remembering the bitter concoction the doctor had prescribed during her previous bout of nightmares. "No, I'm fine, truly. Just need more fresh air during the day, perhaps. Some time away from the ranch might help." Her father's eyes narrowed. "Away? Where would you go?" "I thought perhaps a visit to town," Angelina suggested, striving for casualness. "It's been months since I've seen Elizabeth Hollister, and Mrs. Peterson mentioned they have new fabric at the Mercantile when she was here last week." She held her breath, watching her father consider the request. Under normal circumstances, he was reluctant to let her travel even the short distance to the territorial settlement without an armed escort. But if he believed her health, mental or physical, might benefit, "I suppose that could be arranged," he said finally. "Simmons and I have business with the land office anyway. We could make a day of it. Tomorrow, perhaps." Relief washed through Angelina, immediately followed by anxiety. Her father accompanying her would complicate matters considerably. How would she arrange a private conversation with Judge Hollister? What excuse could she give for seeking him out? But it was better than nothing. A chance, at least, to set their fragile plan in motion. "Thank you, Father," she said, mustering a smile. "I think it will do me good to see something beyond these walls for a change." The Colonel's returning smile held a shadow of guilt, as if he recognized, however dimly, the restrictions he had placed on his daughter's life. "Well, we can't have you sleepwalking into Apache territory, can we? Best to give you some diversion, keep your mind occupied with pleasanter things." If only he knew the truth, that his daughter had already crossed into Apache territory, at least in her heart. That she had formed a connection with the very people he most despised, that she was actively working to thwart the vengeance he had pursued for 3 long years. The knowledge sat heavy in Angelina's chest as she rose to clear the breakfast dishes. For the first time in her life, she was deliberately deceiving her father, undermining his authority, challenging everything he believed. And yet, what choice did she have? To stand by while more blood was spilled? To watch hatred claim more victims on both sides? To see Nodin's efforts for peace crushed beneath the weight of historical enmity and fresh vengeance? No. Whatever the cost, whatever the risk to herself, she had to try. For her mother's memory, for Nodin's vision of a different future, for her own soul's sake, she had to believe that another path was possible. The territorial settlement of Willow Creek had grown considerably since Angelina's last visit. New buildings lined the main street, a hotel with actual glass windows, an expanded mercantile, even a small lending library donated by a wealthy mine owner's wife. The dusty frontier outpost was transforming, slowly but steadily, into something resembling civilization. Colonel McKinnon and Simmons headed directly for the land office upon their arrival, leaving Angelina ostensibly to visit the mercantile and call upon Elizabeth Hollister. The freedom, however temporary, was exhilarating after weeks confined to the ranch. She made a brief appearance at the mercantile, purchasing ribbon and fabric to maintain her cover story, before making her way to the imposing house at the end of the main street where Judge Hollister lived with his family. Her heart pounded as she approached. What would she say? How could she possibly explain her unusual request without revealing too much? Elizabeth, a pretty, dark-haired girl of Angelina's age, welcomed her warmly, exclaiming over her unexpected visit and insisting she stay for tea. It took nearly an hour of polite conversation and catching up before Angelina could gracefully inquire whether the judge was at home. In his study, Elizabeth confirmed, working on some territorial dispute or other, as usual. Why? Did your father send a message for him? Not exactly, Angelina hedged, but there is a matter I'd like to discuss with him if he can spare a few minutes. Elizabeth's curiosity was evident, but she was too well-bred to press for details. I'll see if he's receiving visitors, she offered, rising from her seat in the parlor. Left alone, Angelina rehearsed what she would say, searching for words that would convince the judge without revealing Nodin's involvement or her own increasingly complicated feelings about the Apache warrior. She needed to appear concerned but rational, informed but not suspiciously so. Angelina McKinnon. Judge Hollister's deep voice interrupted her thoughts as he entered the parlor. What a pleasant surprise. Elizabeth says you wish to speak with me. The judge was a tall, distinguished man, with silver-streaked dark hair and penetrating blue eyes that seemed to look straight through pretense and evasion. Angelina had always found him somewhat intimidating, but today she was grateful for his reputation for fairness and wisdom. Yes, sir, she replied, rising to greet him. On a matter of some delicacy. Indeed. His eyebrows rose slightly. Well, perhaps we should continue this conversation in my study. More privacy there. He led the way to a book-lined room at the rear of the house, closing the door firmly behind them. Now then, he said, gesturing for Angelina to take a seat, what's this delicate matter that brings Colonel McKinnon's daughter to seek me out? Angelina took a deep breath. It concerns the Apache, sir, specifically the possibility of preventing further violence between them and the settlers. The judge's expression remained carefully neutral. An admirable goal, certainly, but what makes you think I might have particular influence in such matters? Your reputation for fairness, sir, and your connections with the territorial governor. Angelina leaned forward slightly, her voice earnest. There are those among the Apache who desire peace as much as we do, who see the futility of continued bloodshed, but they need a forum to be heard, a chance to speak directly with those in authority. And you know this how exactly? The judge's tone was mild, but his gaze had sharpened considerably. Here was the dangerous ground. Angelina chose her words with extreme care. I've heard things. In town, from travelers passing through, and I've had time to think, sir, during the long days at the ranch, about what my mother would have wanted, about whether there might be a better way than this endless cycle of raid and reprisal. Commendable thoughts, Judge Hollister said, studying her face, but unusual ones, coming from Colonel McKinnon's household. Your father's views on the Apache are well known, after all. My father has suffered greatly, Angelina replied quietly. His grief has colored his perspective. But I believe that even he, in his heart, must tire of the constant fear, the looking over one's shoulder, the knowing that each day might bring new violence. The judge was silent for a long moment, his fingers steepled beneath his chin as he considered her words. "What exactly are you proposing, Miss McKinnon?" "A meeting," she said simply, "between the territorial governor and representatives of the Apache bands in this region. A chance for both sides to air grievances, to seek common ground, to establish boundaries that both can respect." "A peace council," Judge Hollister murmured, his expression thoughtful. "It's been attempted before, you know, rarely with lasting success." "But surely worth trying again," Angelina pressed, "especially now with tensions rising, with rumors of planned attacks circulating. Surely any chance, however small, of preventing more bloodshed is worth the effort." Another long silence fell as the judge considered her words. Angelina held her breath, aware that everything, Nodin's safety, the prevention of the attack he had warned about, the fragile possibility of a different future, hung on this man's decision. "You speak well, Miss McKinnon," he said finally, "with passion and intelligence. Your mother would be proud." The reference to Sarah McKinnon caught Angelina off guard, bringing unexpected tears to her eyes. "You knew her?" "We were acquainted, yes, before her marriage to your father. A remarkable woman. She saw possibilities where others saw only obstacles." The judge's expression softened slightly. "I see something of her in you now." Before Angelina could respond to this unexpected revelation, a sharp knock came at the study door. Elizabeth's voice called through the wood. "Father, Colonel McKinnon is here to collect Angelina." A flash of panic shot through Angelina. Had her time run out? Had she failed in her mission? Judge Hollister rose, moving toward the door. "One moment, Elizabeth," he called, then turned back to Angelina. "Your proposal deserves consideration, Miss McKinnon. I will speak with the governor when he visits next week. If he is amenable, we will need a way to contact the Apache leaders, to extend the invitation in a manner they will not perceive as a trap." "I may be able to help with that," Angelina said carefully, hope rising in her chest. "If you will trust me." The judge studied her face once more, as if searching for something beyond her words. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, for he nodded slightly. "Very well. Return in 1 week's time. I'll have an answer for you then." "Thank you, sir," Angelina breathed, relief washing through her. It wasn't a commitment, not yet, but it was more than she had dared hope for. As Judge Hollister opened the door to admit her father, Angelina composed her features into a mask of casual politeness. The deception felt wrong yet necessary, for now at least her father could not know what she had set in motion. Not until there was something concrete to show him, some proof that peace was possible. "Ah, Colonel," the judge greeted her father warmly. "Your daughter and I were just discussing the latest novel from Mr. Dickens. She has quite the literary mind." The casual lie, delivered with such easy confidence, both startled and reassured Angelina. It seemed she had found an ally in her quest for peace, even if he didn't yet know the full extent of her involvement or the real source of her information. As she rode home beside her father that afternoon, Angelina's thoughts were already racing ahead to her promised meeting with Nodin in 4 days' time. She had news to share, hope to offer, not a solution, not yet, but a beginning, a chance. For the first time since her mother's death, Angelina felt something like purpose filling the empty spaces in her heart. She was doing something that mattered, something that might make a difference in this blood-soaked territory, something her mother would have approved of. And if that purpose was becoming increasingly tangled with her feelings for a certain Apache warrior, feelings she dared not name even to herself, well, that was a complication she would have to face another day. For now, it was enough to have taken the first step toward peace, toward a future where perhaps, just perhaps, love might prove stronger than hatred after all. The 5 days until her meeting with Nodin stretched endlessly for Angelina. Each hour seemed to crawl by, weighted with anticipation and anxiety. The seed of hope planted during her conversation with Judge Hollister had begun to grow, but it remained fragile, vulnerable to the harsh realities of the territory and the deep-rooted hatreds that defined it. Her father noticed her distraction, attributing it to lingering effects of her sleepwalking episode. His concern manifested as increased vigilance, more frequent checks on her whereabouts, less time alone, subtle questions about her thoughts and activities. The attention made planning her escape to meet Nodin significantly more difficult. On the 4th night, opportunity finally presented itself. A neighbor arrived with news of Apache sightings near his property, drawing Colonel McKinnon and several ranch hands away for what would likely be an overnight expedition. Angelina felt a twist of guilt, knowing the sightings might well be connected to the very attack Nodin had warned her about, an attack she had not revealed to her father. But the alternative, exposing Nodin's warning, which would inevitably lead to questions about her source, seemed equally impossible. She was walking a knife's edge between loyalties, and there was no safe path forward, only the least devastating of difficult choices. Once her father's party had ridden beyond sight, Angelina moved swiftly. She saddled Penny herself, packed supplies for an overnight journey, and left a note claiming she was visiting Elizabeth Hollister, a falsehood that would buy her time if her father returned unexpectedly. The canyon Nodin had described lay west of the line shack, requiring several hours of hard riding across increasingly rugged terrain. As the sun began its westward descent, Angelina guided Penny into a narrow passage between towering red rock walls. The sudden transition from open desert to this sheltered space was startling. Temperatures dropped, the light softened, and sound seemed to behave differently, echoing yet muffled. As the passage widened, she found herself in a natural amphitheater surrounded by vertical rock faces. And there, etched and painted onto the stone, were the images Nodin had mentioned. Handprints, spirals, figures of animals and humans rendered in ochre, white, and black. Some appeared ancient, others more recent, creating a visual record spanning countless generations. A sacred place indeed. Angelina dismounted, feeling suddenly like an intruder in a church not her own. She led Penny to a small seep, where water trickled from the rock, forming a shallow pool before disappearing back into the earth. "You came." Nodin's voice behind her made her start. She turned to find him standing at the entrance to the canyon, silhouetted against the late afternoon light. He wore traditional Apache clothing, his long hair tied back with a leather thong, a knife at his belt, the only visible weapon. "I said I would," she replied, her voice steady despite the sudden quickening of her pulse. He moved toward her, his steps silent on the sandy ground. "And did you speak with the judge?" "Yes." Angelina quickly recounted her conversation with Judge Hollister, his cautious interest, his promise to discuss the matter with the territorial governor. "He asked me to return in a week for his answer." "A week?" Nodin's expression darkened. "The attack is planned for 3 days from now. My father grows impatient with what he sees as white encroachment on our hunting grounds. The young warriors are eager to prove themselves." "Can you delay them?" Angelina asked urgently. "I have tried." Frustration edged his voice. "I have spoken of the need for caution for considering other paths. Some listen, but others—" He shook his head. "They call me white man's friend behind my back, question my courage, my loyalty to the people." The admission revealed a vulnerability Angelina hadn't fully appreciated before. Nodin's position among his own people was as complicated as hers was becoming among hers, both walking between worlds, both questioning the certainties that defined their communities. "Perhaps if I spoke with your father," she suggested, the idea forming even as she voiced it. "If he could see that at least one white settler desired peace." "No." Nodin's response was immediate and forceful. "It would be too dangerous. Some of the warriors would kill you on sight simply for being McKinnon's daughter." "But you wouldn't let them," Angelina said, the certainty in her voice surprising even herself. Nodin's expression softened. "I would die before allowing harm to come to you," he said quietly. "But I am only one man, and there are limits to my influence, especially now when so many question my commitment to our cause." The simple declaration sent warmth spreading through Angelina's chest. She stepped closer to him, close enough to see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes, to smell the sage and smoke scent that clung to his buckskin clothing. "Then we need another plan," she said. "A way to buy time until the judge can arrange the peace council." Nodin studied her face, his expression thoughtful. "There may be a way," he said slowly, "but it would require great trust on both sides. Tell me." "My grandmother, my father's mother, is respected among our people, a keeper of the old ways, a woman of visions. Her voice carries weight, even with the warriors. If she were to speak against the attack, to claim she had seen ill omens—" "Would she do that?" Angelina asked, hope rising. "Perhaps. She has expressed concern about the path my father has chosen, but she would need to be convinced that there is a real alternative, not just delay for delay's sake. Then we must convince her. Angelina's determination grew with each word. Take me to her. Let me speak with her myself. Nodin stared at her in disbelief. You would enter an Apache camp? Voluntarily place yourself among those your father has taught you to fear? Yes, Angelina replied simply. If it means preventing bloodshed, if it means giving peace a chance. For a long moment, Nodin said nothing, his dark eyes searching hers as if trying to gauge the depth of her commitment, the sincerity of her offer. Then, slowly, he reached out and took her hand, his touch sending a current of warmth up her arm. You continue to amaze me, Angelina McKinnon, he said softly. Your courage shames many warriors I know. Not courage, she demurred, just certainty that this cycle of violence must end, that someone must take the first step, however dangerous. And that someone is us, Nodin finished, his voice carrying a note of wonder. The colonel's daughter and the chief's son, an unlikely alliance. The word alliance seemed inadequate for what had grown between them, but Angelina let it stand. There were more pressing concerns than defining the strange, powerful connection that had formed across the divide of their two worlds. When can we go? She asked. To meet your grandmother. Now, Nodin replied. Tonight. Our camp is half a day's ride from here. We could arrive by dawn. The immediacy of his answer startled her. My father will be searching for me if I'm not back by tomorrow evening. Then we must move quickly, Nodin said. Speak with my grandmother, secure her support, and return you to your home before your absence is discovered. It was madness, of course. Entering an Apache camp relying on the protection of a man whose own standing among his people was precarious, pinning their hopes on convincing an elder they had never met to oppose a war many of her people eagerly anticipated. Yet what alternative remained? Wait for the attack to occur, for more blood to stain the desert sand, for whatever fragile possibility of peace that existed to be shattered beyond repair. Let's go, Angelina said. Decision made. But first, I need to send word to Elizabeth Hollister to maintain my cover story in case anyone comes looking for me. Nodin nodded. There is a trader who moves between our camp and the settlement. He could deliver a message. As the sun set behind the canyon walls, they made their preparations. Angelina wrote a brief note to Elizabeth on a scrap of paper from her saddlebag, explaining that she had decided to stay overnight at a friend's ranch and would call on Elizabeth the following day. The story was flimsy, but might buy crucial hours if her father returned early and came looking for her. With the note secured, they mounted their horses. Angelina on Penny, Nodin on a spotted pony with remarkable endurance, and set out into the gathering darkness. They rode side by side when terrain permitted, Nodin leading when the path narrowed. Their conversation was sparse but comfortable, the silence between them free of awkwardness or strain. As the moon rose, bathing the desert in silver light, Angelina found herself studying Nodin's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the proud set of his shoulders, the quiet dignity with which he carried himself. How strange that this man, whom she should by all rights fear and despise, had become someone she trusted implicitly, someone whose presence brought comfort rather than alarm, someone whose touch lingered in her memory, whose voice echoed in her dreams. "What will your people think?" she asked suddenly. "When you ride into camp with a white woman, with me?" Nodin glanced at her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "There will be suspicion, questions. Some may even see it as betrayal." He paused, then added more softly, "But I know what I'm doing is right, for both our peoples, and that matters more than their judgment." "And your father? What will he say?" A shadow crossed Nodin's face. "He will be angry, disappointed perhaps. But he loves our people above all else. If he can be convinced that there is a better path to securing their future than violence," he shrugged, "we shall see." The simple "we" warmed Angelina more than she cared to admit. Whatever dangers lay ahead, they would face them together. There was strength in that and courage to be drawn from their shared purpose. As they rode through the night, the landscape gradually changed, flatter desert giving way to rocky foothills, scattered juniper and pinon pine appearing with increasing frequency. Nodin explained that his people preferred to camp near water and game, away from the exposed plains where cavalry patrols might easily spot them. "We move often," he said, "following ancient patterns, summer camps in the high country, winter camps in sheltered canyons. This is how we have lived for generations." "Until the white settlers came," Angelina added, understanding dawning. "Fencing land, claiming water sources, disrupting those patterns." Nodin nodded, approval in his glance. "You understand more than most of your kind." "I'm trying to," she replied honestly. "There's so much I didn't know, so much my father never explained." "Perhaps because he himself does not understand," Nodin suggested gently. "It is easier to fight an enemy you do not see as human. Easier to take what is not yours if you believe its original owners are savages without rights or feelings." The assessment was painfully accurate. Colonel McKinnon, like many settlers, viewed the Apache as obstacles to progress rather than people with legitimate claims to the land they had inhabited for centuries. It was a perspective Angelina had unquestioningly accepted until her path crossed with Nodin's, until she had been forced to see beyond the simplistic narratives that defined her world. Dawn was breaking as they crested a ridge and looked down into a sheltered valley. Thin wisps of smoke rose from several cooking fires, barely visible in the early morning light. Wickiups, dome-shaped dwellings covered with brush and hides, were arranged in a loose circle around a central clearing. Horses grazed in a natural corral formed by a bend in the small stream that ran through the valley. The Apache camp. Nodin's home. Angelina's heart raced as they descended toward it. What awaited her there? Hostility? Violence? Or the chance, however slim, to change the course of events that seemed destined to bring more suffering to both their peoples? "Stay close to me," Nodin murmured as they approached the first dwellings. "Speak only when spoken to. Show no fear, but no aggression either." She nodded, straightening her spine, lifting her chin. Whatever happened next, she would face it with dignity. For Nodin's sake, for the sake of the peace they both sought, and for her own self-respect. Their arrival did not go unnoticed. Children spotted them first, calling out in Apache before running to alert the adults. Soon, a small crowd had gathered at the edge of the camp, watching with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility, as Nodin led a white woman, a McKinnon no less, into their midst. A tall, powerfully built man stepped forward from the group. His face was lined with age and weathered by sun, his long hair streaked with grey and adorned with eagle feathers. Authority radiated from him like heat from a fire. Chief Kele, Nodin's father. He spoke rapidly in Apache, his tone sharp with what sounded like anger or disbelief. Nodin replied calmly, gesturing occasionally toward Angelina. Though she couldn't understand the words, the tension between father and son was unmistakable. Finally, Chief Kele switched to halting but clear English. "Why you bring this woman here? She is McKinnon's daughter, enemy." Before Nodin could answer, Angelina slid from her horse and faced the chief directly. "I come seeking peace," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I bring warning of soldiers planning to attack your people, and I offer a different path, one that does not lead to more death on both sides." Murmurs ran through the gathered Apache at her words, though whether of skepticism or interest she couldn't tell. Chief Keel studied her with narrowed eyes, his hand resting significantly on the knife at his belt. "Why McKinnon's daughter want peace?" he demanded. "Your father kill many Apache. Swear to kill more." "My father's path is not mine," Angelina replied simply. "I have seen enough death, enough hatred. I believe there must be a better way for all our children to live." For a long moment, Chief Kele said nothing, his dark eyes, so like Nodin's yet harder, more unyielding, boring into hers as if trying to detect deception. Then a new voice entered the conversation, speaking in Apache from the edge of the gathering. An elderly woman stepped forward, her white hair braided with colorful beads, her face deeply lined but her eyes sharp and alert. She spoke directly to Chief Kele, her tone firm despite her apparent age. Though Angelina couldn't understand the words, their effect was immediate. The chief's posture relaxed slightly and he inclined his head in what appeared to be reluctant acquiescence. "My grandmother," Nodin murmured to Angelina. "She says you are to be treated as a guest, not an enemy. That she has been expecting you." "Expecting me?" Angelina whispered back, confused. But there was no time for clarification. The old woman, a pony, Nodin had called her during their earlier conversations, approached, studying Angelina with unsettling intensity. "So," she said in accented but clear English, "you are the one my grandson speaks of in his sleep." Heat rushed to Angelina's cheeks at the unexpected statement. Beside her, Nodin stiffened slightly, but said nothing. "I come seeking your help," Angelina said, choosing to ignore the implication in the old woman's words. "There is a chance for peace, but we need time. Time that will be lost if your warriors attack the white settlements as planned." Aponi's weathered face revealed nothing. "And why should we trust the word of McKinnon's daughter? Your father has shed much Apache blood. Judge me by my own actions, not my father's," Angelina replied steadily. "I am here unarmed, placing my life in your hands because I believe peace is possible, because I have spoken with Judge Hollister, who is willing to arrange a council between your leaders and the territorial governor. But that chance will be lost if more blood is spilled now." The old woman's eyes narrowed slightly. "You have courage, golden-haired one, but courage alone does not bring peace. There must also be wisdom and trust." She glanced at her grandson. "Nodin believes you possess these qualities. I am not yet convinced." "Then let me prove it," Angelina said, an idea forming as she spoke. "Let me stay here, in your camp, until the peace council can be arranged, as your guest and your hostage, a sign of my good faith." Nodin started beside her. "Angelina." "No, it makes sense," she interrupted, not looking at him. "If I return home, my father may discover what I've been doing. He would never allow me to continue working for peace. But if I remain here, I can send word to Judge Hollister through the trader Nodin mentioned, and my presence ensures that I am not setting a trap, that the peace council is genuinely intended." Aponi studied her with renewed interest. "You would stay willingly among those your people call savages, risk your father's wrath, perhaps even your life?" "Yes," Angelina replied simply, "if it means a chance for peace." A long silence followed her declaration. Chief Keeler and several other Apache men conferred in low voices, occasionally glancing her way. Nodin stood tense beside her, his expression troubled, but also filled with something that looked remarkably like pride. Finally, Aponi spoke again. "It shall be as you suggest, golden-haired one. You will remain with us as both guest and guarantee. If your judge proves false, if soldiers come in place of peace talkers—" She left the threat unspoken, but clear. "They won't," Angelina assured her. "Judge Hollister is a man of his word, and I would not betray those who offer me hospitality." She hesitated, then added, "But I will need to send word to him, explaining my absence and confirming the arrangements." "The trader comes tomorrow," Aponi said with a nod. "You may write your message then." She turned to Nodin, speaking rapidly in Apache. He replied briefly, then turned to Angelina. "My grandmother says you will stay in her wickiup," he explained. "It is an honor. She rarely shares her dwelling, even with family." Angelina inclined her head toward the old woman. "Thank you for your hospitality. I am grateful." Aponi's lined face crinkled in what might have been amusement. "We shall see if your gratitude survives a few days of Apache living, golden-haired one. Our ways are not yours." With that, she turned and walked toward a wickiup slightly separated from the others, clearly expecting Angelina to follow. As she moved to comply, Nodin caught her arm gently. "This is dangerous," he murmured, his dark eyes filled with concern. "If your father discovers where you are—" "He won't," Angelina assured him, though the possibility filled her with dread. Colonel McKinnon would see her willing presence in an Apache camp as the ultimate betrayal. And even if he did, it would be too late. The peace process will already be in motion. Nodin's hand lingered on her arm, his touch warming her through the fabric of her sleeve. "You are either the bravest woman I have ever known," he said softly, "or the most foolhardy." A smile touched Angelina's lips, despite the gravity of their situation. "Perhaps both," she suggested. "Now go, speak with your father. Convince him to delay the attack. I will be fine with your grandmother." Reluctantly, Nodin released her arm. As she followed Aponi toward the wickiup that would be her home for the coming days, Angelina felt the weight of many eyes upon her, some curious, some hostile, some merely assessing. She had crossed a line that few white women had ever crossed, placing herself voluntarily among a people she had been raised to fear and despise. Yet strangely, she felt no fear. There was anxiety, yes, and uncertainty about what lay ahead. but also a deep, quiet conviction that she was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what needed to be done. As the sun climbed higher in the morning sky, casting long shadows across the Apache camp, Angelina McKinnon stepped willingly into a world she had never expected to enter, and in doing so, began to weave a new pattern in the tapestry of her life, one that intertwined irrevocably with the destiny of a warrior caught between worlds, just as she was. What that pattern would ultimately reveal, only time would tell. But as she ducked into the cool dimness of a pony's wickiup, one thing became startlingly clear in Angelina's heart. Her feelings for Nodin had grown far beyond alliance, beyond friendship, into something she had never anticipated and could no longer deny. Love. Impossible, dangerous, transformative love. And that realization changed everything. Dawn broke over the Apache camp, painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. Angelina emerged from a pony's wickiup, where she had spent a surprisingly restful night. 3 days had passed since her impulsive decision to remain among Nodin's people, 3 days of discovery and growing clarity about her feelings. Life in the Apache camp was unlike anything she had imagined. Far from the chaotic savagery her father had described, she found order, purpose, and connection. Women worked with quiet efficiency, children played games that taught survival skills, and warriors maintained weapons, but also told stories and cared for their families. A pony watched her constantly, asking probing questions about Angelina's life and her feelings for Nodin, questions that Angelina answered with increasing honesty as trust grew between them. "You have a good heart," a pony told her on the second evening, "but a divided spirit, torn between the world of your father and the world you have glimpsed through my grandson's eyes." "Is that so terrible?" Angelina asked. "To see beyond the boundaries others have drawn? Terrible? No. Dangerous, yes. Those who walk between worlds often find themselves belonging to neither. Yet sometimes such ones become bridges that others may cross." On the morning of the 4th day, Angelina spotted Nodin returning from an early hunt. He had been respectful but distant these past days, aware of the many eyes that followed their interactions. Those eyes were less hostile now than when she had first arrived, as the Apache observed her willingness to learn their ways. Even Chief Cayley's stern countenance had relaxed somewhat, especially after Angelina's message to Judge Hollister had been dispatched with the trader. The letter confirmed her safety and urged the judge to proceed with arrangements for the Peace Council. Nodin approached, his expression warming. "The trader returned this morning," he said quietly. "Walk with me. There is something I would show you." They moved away from the center of camp, following a trail toward the stream. Once hidden from view behind a stand of cottonwoods, Nodin withdrew a folded paper sealed with wax. "From Judge Hollister," he explained, handing her the letter. With trembling fingers, Angelina broke the seal. "The governor has agreed," she said, looking up at Nodin with shining eyes. "He will meet with your father and the other Apache leaders in 2 weeks at the old mission near Silver Creek." Relief washed across Nodin's features. "This is good news, better than I dared hope for." "There's more," Angelina continued. "The governor has agreed to suspend military operations during the negotiations if your people halt raids on settlements." "A truce," Nodin said. "My father may agree to this, especially with the support of the elders, but some of the younger warriors will be difficult to control, as will some of the settlers," Angelina acknowledged, "my father included." "And yet it is a beginning," Nodin replied, his voice warming with cautious optimism. They stood in silence, the magnitude of what they had set in motion settling over them. Her peace council between Apache leaders and territorial authorities, something that had been attempted before, but never with such careful preparation. "We should tell your father," Angelina said. "And a pony." "Yes," Nodin agreed, but he made no move to return to camp. Instead, his gaze lingered on her face, softening in a way that made her heart beat faster. "Angelina, these past days, watching you among my people, seeing your courage, your openness to our ways." He paused. "You have become something I never expected to find in this life, something precious beyond naming." The simple declaration broke something open inside Angelina, a dam holding back feelings she had tried to contain, to rationalize, to deny even to herself. "I feel the same," she whispered. "When I'm with you, Nodin, I feel whole." as if I found a part of myself I didn't know was missing. He stepped closer. Among my people, it is believed that some souls recognize each other, even when they meet in unexpected forms, that the Creator sometimes places two halves of the same spirit in different bodies, different worlds, and sets them on paths that will eventually cross. And when they find each other, Angelina asked. Then they have a choice, Nodin replied, to acknowledge the connection and accept whatever joy and pain may come with it, or to deny it, to turn away, to live safely but incompletely. I don't want safety, Angelina said firmly, not if it means denying what I feel for you. Nodin's hand rose to cup her cheek. Nor I, though the path ahead will not be easy. Your father, my father sees the world through the lens of his grief, Angelina interrupted, but I cannot live my life bound by his hatred. I have to follow my own heart. And does your heart lead you to me, Angelina McKinnon? In answer, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss deepened quickly, Nodin's arms encircling her as her hands found their way to his shoulders. Time seemed to suspend itself, the moment stretching into eternity. When they finally parted, Angelina felt fundamentally changed, as if the last walls within her heart had crumbled, leaving her both vulnerable and strengthened. We should return, Nodin said reluctantly. Before we are missed. They were nearly back to the camp when shouts erupted ahead, urgent, alarmed voices calling in Apache. Nodin stiffened, listening. What is it? Angelina asked, tension coiling in her stomach. Riders approaching. Many of them. He turned to her, his eyes grave. Armed white men, led by a colonel, her father. Cold dread washed through Angelina. How had he found her? I must go to him, she said urgently. Explain before there's bloodshed. Nodin caught her arm. It's too dangerous. If he sees you among us, coming from our camp willingly, he's my father, Angelina interrupted. Whatever his faults, he loves me. He won't shoot his own daughter. It's not you I fear for, Nodin replied. If he believes you've been held against your will. The implication was clear. Colonel McKinnon would assume the worst and react with violence, destroying the fragile foundation for peace they had built. Get your father and the elders, she said. Bring the governor's letter. I'll meet my father before he reaches the camp. With a final lingering look, Nodin turned and sprinted toward the center of camp. Angelina ran toward the ridge where sentries had spotted the approaching riders. She reached the ridgetop and saw them, a dozen mounted men advancing across the valley, rifles ready. At their head rode Colonel McKinnon, his military bearing unmistakable. Drawing a deep breath, Angelina stepped out from cover, raising her arms high in a gesture of peace, and began descending toward the riders. "Father!" she called. "Father, it's me! I'm here!" The column halted. Her father spurred his horse forward, breaking away from his men. As he approached, she could see his face, lined with exhaustion, tight with a mixture of relief and rage. "Angelina, are you hurt? Did they harm you?" "I'm fine," she called back. "I'm here of my own free will. There's no need for weapons." He reined in his horse, staring at her in disbelief. "Of your own will? You've been living among Apache savages by choice?" "Yes," Angelina replied simply. "And they are not savages, father. They are people, just as we are, with hopes and fears and dreams for their children's futures." The colonel's face darkened. "They've poisoned your mind. But it's all right now, Angie. We're here to take you home." "I'm not confused," she countered. "For the first time in years, I see clearly. There is a chance for peace, father. The governor has agreed to meet with the Apache leaders to negotiate boundaries that both sides can respect." "Negotiations? With the same devils who murdered your mother?" His voice rose, incredulous. "Have you forgotten what they did?" "I've forgotten nothing," Angelina said quietly. "But I've learned there is more to this story than you've allowed yourself to see. Not all Apache are raiders. Not all whites are innocent. There has been wrong on both sides." Her father stared at her as if she were speaking a language he couldn't comprehend. Behind him, his men waited tensely, rifles ready. Behind her, she knew the Apache warriors would be preparing to defend their camp. Everything balanced on a knife's edge, peace or continued bloodshed. "Come with me, father," she said, extending her hand. "Meet with Chief Kale. See the governor's letter. Hear what is being proposed before you decide that war is the only answer." Colonel McKinnon's weathered face revealed the battle within him, decades of military training and 3 years of hatred warring with love for his daughter. "Please," Angelina added softly. "For Mother's sake, she never believed violence was the answer. Honor her memory by at least listening before you act." The invocation of Sarah McKinnon's gentle spirit hit home. Something shifted in her father's eyes. Not acceptance, but perhaps the first crack in his wall of certainty. "1 hour," he said finally, his voice rough. "I'll give you 1 hour to make your case. But my men stay ready, and at the first sign of treachery—" "There will be none," Angelina assured him. "This is a chance for a new beginning, Father, for all of us." As the colonel dismounted and instructed his men to hold position, Angelina felt a wave of cautious hope. The immediate crisis had been averted, but the real challenge lay ahead, bringing together two proud, wounded peoples whose history of conflict had left deep scars. Yet for the first time since her mother's death, she believed that healing might be possible, that the cycle of violence could be broken, that love might prove stronger than hatred after all. And as she led her father toward the Apache camp, toward Nodin and Chief Keeley, and the uncertain future they would all face together, Angelina carried that belief like a flame against the darkness, illuminating a path none of them had been able to see before. A path toward peace, toward understanding, toward a world where a colonel's daughter and a chief's son might love each other openly, without the weight of history's bitter legacy standing between them. As I close this narrative about Angelina and Nodin, I am reminded of what truly defines the American spirit, not just the tenacity of pioneers who forged frontiers, but our capacity to evolve through our deepest and most painful mistakes. The history of the United States, with its scars and triumphs, is fundamentally about people who, like our protagonists, had the courage to imagine a different path when everyone around them saw only hatred and division. Her father swore to kill the Apache, but she swore to love him, reminds us that true heroism lies not in weapons or battles won, but in the willingness to reach across chasms of misunderstanding and prejudice. Perhaps the most valuable lesson Angelina and Nodin offer us is this: when we choose love over hatred, when we dare to see the other as fully human, we not only rewrite our own destiny, but open the possibility of healing collective wounds that once seemed eternal. With eternal gratitude for the power of stories that unite us, Wild West whispers, thank you so much for staying with us until the end of this unforgettable journey between Angelina and Nodin. If this story moved your heart, please leave a like, write a comment and share it with someone who loves powerful love stories. From the bottom of our hearts, we kindly ask you to support our channel so we can continue creating more stories filled with love, redemption, and dramatic twists. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new story. At the very end of this video, another recommended story from our channel will appear. Click it, and let yourself be surprised by another emotional adventure like this one.